This week, we welcome Alex Wood, Chief Information Security Officer at Pulte Financial Services, in the leadership discussion when getting fired is good for your career, using experiments to launch new products, why aligning IT with business goals is key, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 105, recorded November 5th, 2018. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here from Colorado, joined by my co-host, Paul Asadorian in G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here as we make the transition from our former regular host, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo, who will still be participating in the show and working with us. Matt has stepped into this role to help out on a regular basis with Business Security Weekly and as the CEO for Security Weekly, as I will be the CTO. I'm imagining, Matt, at the beginning of the next segment, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I saved it for the second segment until after we get through our guest interview and do it as part of the leadership discussion.
Sweet.
All right, join us for our webcast with Signal Sciences entitled, Which Way Should You Shift Testing in the SDLC? This webcast will be held November 8th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Go to securityweekly.com/Signal Sciences to register now. All right, I would like to welcome Alex Wood, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at Pulte Financial Services. Alex has over 18 years of experience in information security and more than 22 years in IT. Alex has served as director on the international board of the Information System Security Association, is the past president of the ISSA Denver chapter. Alex is also co-host of the Colorado Equal Security podcast, which I have participated on before. Alex, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you guys having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I was going back and trying to think about how long have we known each other? We're both here in Colorado, and I remember the event, but I don't remember the year. I was doing an ISSA session up north.
Yeah.
I think you were still with AT&T at the time, so that was probably what, 6-8 years ago?
Yeah, something like that. It would have been somewhere between 2008, 2012 in that area. I remember it as well because it was a January event, and we had a great snowstorm the day before, and we were actually wondering if anybody was going to show up. And we were glad that you showed up since you were speaking. So that was definitely positive.
Well, it's, when you live in Colorado, you have to be prepared for the weather. So yes, I'm always prepared to make sure I make it to my meetings. So that's good. So I asked Alex to come on. I've done the Colorado Equals Security podcast as an audio podcast. I think that was earlier this year, Alex.
Yep.
We did that, or late last year. And I thought it would be great to bring on a chief information security officer onto the show and really kind of walk through a couple different pieces, kind of your career, your current role, some of the challenges you face as a CISO. And when I look at our backgrounds, we're similar. I started in IT back in the nuclear power days. I went to security, but my path is very different from yours in where I ended up. So give us a quick overview kind of your career and how you ended up where you are today with Pulte.
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of fell into security like a lot of people by accident. I began my career in IT in general. I moved out to Colorado, and I kind of didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And I'd always been a computer guy, spent a lot of time on computers growing up, but I hadn't gone into like computer science in college because I was just not a big fan of the higher level math. And back then, that's kind of what computer science was. It was a lot more math and a little bit of computers. So actually got a degree in chemistry, and then realized, well, maybe I don't want to do anything with this. So moved out here to Colorado, got sort of an entry level IT job. And then one of the guys I was working with moved over. I was at IBM, and he moved over to the managed security services group there to do pen testing. And I had never heard of it before. And it just kind of blew my mind that somebody would get paid to do that. And so I kept my eyes open for other openings in that group, got in as a security operations role, actually one of the first security operations folks for IBM MSS back in the day. We started up their security operations center. We ran 24/7, but we had 3 people to run 24/7. So I was the day shift. There was another guy that was second shift, and then another person that was third shift. So it was pretty amazing, kind of getting into the ground floor there, and did a bunch of stuff with the managed security services group there. Eventually, IBM, I say that they sold me to AT&T. There's always been a funny relationship between IBM and AT&T, and one day I worked for IBM, the next day I worked for AT&T, kind of doing the same thing. But spent a little more time at AT&T, and then kind of realized I'd spent my career working at these giant corporations, and kind of felt like I wanted to go somewhere else and try and have a little bit more impact. So I left there and was lucky enough to land with an oil and gas company here in Denver, starting their security program. So I got to kind of build that from the ground up, and that was really my entry into running a security program. So learned a lot there, had a good time doing that. Moved on from there, went to a healthcare company, spent a little time doing risk management for them. And then the opportunity here at Pulte opened up, and I managed to get this CISO role. And I've been here for the past approximately 3 years running the security program. So it's been great. I really enjoy the leadership parts of security, building a program, managing a program, doing that sort of stuff. It's been really exciting.
Now, Alex, when you had me nervous when you said you got your degree in chemistry and then went to Colorado, I'm really glad you didn't say you were making like illegal drugs instead of getting a job in IT.
It would have been New Mexico right at that time.
Right, yes.
Cooking some stuff up or that sort of thing. But no, but yeah, I kind of stayed away from that. Figured I'd maybe go down the legal path as opposed to.
That's good. We're glad. Which brings you here today, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have now almost everything's now legal
in Colorado. Yeah,
we're going. Yeah, we were the first ones to do it here in Colorado. So I mean that's interesting, right? Because there's a lot of people that think I'm an analyst in a SOC running, managed service environment, or just sitting in the SOC managing, and here you are, CISO of one of the largest home builders in the United States. You're on the financial services side of that business, because of the mortgage and insurance and some of the other things in that business. So I think that's a great story, because anybody can start anywhere, even without an IT or security degree, and end up becoming a chief information security officer, which is why I wanted to bring you on to tell that story, because so many of us think that we have to start in a certain place or have a certain degree to get to this level. It's not really true.
No, I totally agree. And I think some of the best folks that I've worked with or that have worked for me are the ones that didn't come up with security in mind necessarily, right? It was more of a mindset for them, and then eventually transitioned into doing something related to security. I see now there are lots of programs out there to, get your degree in cybersecurity, or other things like that. And we do internships here, and I find a lot talking to people that are getting a degree in those sorts of areas, that they don't have a lot of the experience that I want them to have. Yeah, they're going to come out with some knowledge about concepts for security and maybe information about tools or other things like that. But I mean, I learned most of my stuff by playing around and understanding the IT environment and what was going on, and that really, I think, led me to be better at security, because I understood the base of IT and the things that were going on there. You have somebody that just goes to school for security, and they miss out on a lot of that stuff. So I honestly think, having that passion for security, not necessarily a degree or specific training in it coming up, I think really helps people.
Well, and I think a lot of folks feel like they need an MBA. Is that a common path? And what's your thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, I think it can be helpful. But it, just like any other schooling, I think it's pretty expensive. So I personally don't have one. I think you can learn a lot of the same concepts that you would get by getting an official MBA, through reading, through online. They have basically you can get sort of free MBA. It's not actually a degree, but that sort of training now. Also, I think if you step up and you're willing to work on the more business type engagements throughout your career, it's going to help you as well. Learn about how budgeting and finances work. Learn about the planning processes. Learn about all that sort of thing within your organization, because that stuff is happening, and that's what you're going to learn when you get an MBA. But a lot of times, the technical folks, IT folks, they don't want anything to do with that. They want to strictly be hands on keyboard and only do that sort of thing. I think you need to make sure that you try and stretch yourself and get more well-rounded. Doesn't necessarily have to be an MBA, but if you're the type of person that needs some sort of goal like that to be focused, then sure, I think that you can get a lot of great information from getting an MBA or some other kind of business degree.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing that people have to understand in the CISO role is you have to understand the breadth of not only the technology, but I think understanding how that aligns to the business, right? I think you see now you being more engaged with the business, and therefore you have to understand aspects of how the business runs in order to be effective in your role as a CISO as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Again, sort of coming up, I think people were doing security for security's sake in a lot of times, and I think you saw this with security professionals. People would be frustrated that security wasn't being taken seriously. Well, I think a lot of the times we weren't being taken seriously because we didn't understand what the business was actually doing. So, when we said we want to implement, some firewall rule, or we wanted to, stop this or that, we didn't understand that was really, preventing the business from doing something. So, my motto is always, you want to, enable your business to operate securely. You don't necessarily want to do security for security's sake. And I think one of the areas that I've really sort of started to love was around risk management. When my last job, I was in a risk management organization, and I think that really helped me connect more with what it was that risk really means, and how it is that relates to the organization. And also with my job here, I talk to the business all the time. I am out there trying to figure out what is important to them, what it is that essentially makes our business run, and then figuring out how it is that on the IT side and the information side, how is it that happens. And once I know that, it makes it a lot easier for us to figure out what it is that's most important to try and secure.
Right, and you and I have had lots of conversations about metrics and alignment of metrics, and some of the things you have to report up to your executive team to really kind of measure that alignment of the business goals with some of the things you're doing on the security side as well, which I think is really important for CISOs to understand, right? There is a risk component here that has to be addressed, and I know you've done some work on the metric side to help kind of measure aspects of that. Can you kind of give some folks an overview of some of the things you've done, a little bit of a high level of how you kind of build those metrics and kind of report those up?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, with many security programs, you start with a framework, just so that you can have a baseline to figure out, what is the universe of things that you want to do, sort of from a control standpoint. So whether that is, ISO 27000, this cybersecurity framework, SANS Top 20, whatever it is that, it might be, you have to have, somewhere that you want to start, just so you can understand the, all of the pieces that are out there. Then you need to figure out what it is in those that you are going to be very good at, right? So unless you're required to be, say, certified for ISO 27000, you're probably not going to be great at every single one of those controls. So then it's figuring out which of those is the most important to you as it relates to the risks to your business. And then implementing some specific controls, the things that you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis to instantiate those pieces of the framework. And so when we do that, you're taking each one of those specific controls that you're doing, and you want to measure it, right? You want to know if you're doing a good job at it. So each one of those specific controls should have some kind of measure and metric that goes along with it. I think that scares people sometimes, because it's not easy to have good metrics around everything like that. But it doesn't always have to be, extremely detailed either, right? I try and do a couple of metrics around each one of the controls. One of those is essentially a metric to show that the control is actually operating in the way that it should be, like you're actually doing the things you need to do for that control to work. And then sort of a second metric, which is, making sure that it is actually working effectively, right? So are you driving the metric in the way that it needs to go, more like, a key performance indicator or something like that. So I think some of these can be very simple. Some of them can be more complex. I think also, people get wrapped around the axle too, trying to make sure that they get it perfect. I think, starting somewhere and measuring to see what you're doing and if you're getting better, and then continually refining those to make sure that it is accurately reflecting what it is that you're really doing. So I think that that's really helpful in making sure that you're measuring what's going on in your program. And then, of course, once you've got that, it's really easy to take those metrics, communicate them, whether it's up or down or peers, whatever it might be. You've got all this data about what it is that you're doing and how you're getting better. So it's great to share that with others in the organization.
And then I would imagine aspects of that also helps you drive kind of your priorities and budget for the next year. Because, based on how, if you're making improvements in certain areas, but you're falling behind in others, that would influence where some of your projects and budgets for the previous or for the next year would come into play. Can you give us a kind of an overview of some of the areas, at least from your perspective, kind of where are some of your big challenges in the CISO role today? What are some of those emerging challenges that you're trying to get your arms around?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned emerging challenges. I think it's kind of on both ends of the spectrum, right? There's always something new, whether that is cloud or DevOps or artificial intelligence or blockchain or whatever it is, the buzzword for the day that's coming up that's new that your business might be exploring. Making sure that you're staying on top of that, so that when your business starts exploring those particular things, you can help direct them in the right way to be secure. But then on the other end of the spectrum too, you always have the stuff that's lagging, right? Your legacy items, your technical debt, all the things that it's not sexy to go out and fix. If I've had a system that's been sitting around forever and nothing has happened because of that, well then, why is it that we need to fix it? It's not causing anybody any problem. But again, that goes back to the risk question too, right? So if, the longer that you have that old system, likely the larger the risk is going to get. So helping to communicate how that risk is growing and obviously just because there is a risk doesn't mean that you need to fix it, but at some point it's going to be big enough where if you haven't gotten someone to take a look at it and try and fix it before, Now that risk is great enough where you're going to have to go in and get somebody to take care of it. And I think that tail on the low end, it's a super long tail, and you always have to stay on top of it. I think from the business side, people are always talking about driving value, and it's easy to show the value in the new stuff that you put out. It's a lot harder to show the value in the old stuff that you're getting rid of.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? As we think about it from our budgeting perspective, we think, okay, we've done those things, and maybe we don't have to do them anymore because it's not the new cool stuff, but it still has to be done because there's still potential risk in those areas that have to be resolved. Yeah, it's always interesting. So any specific solutions or areas you're looking at today on the Pulte side, just to give the listeners some of the things that you're kind of looking into right now?
Yeah, talking about both ends of it again, we're pretty traditional in the way that we operate. So I guess in one respect, I get a little leeway from some of the really cutting edge stuff. But I think along with most people, we're investigating how we can better secure cloud stuff, whether that be, CASB or the process around DevOps and CI/CD and other things like that, leading edge sort of things like that. We do have public facing web apps, so there's always the web app security component, making sure that we're staying on top of all the changes that happen there, and all, whether it's new or not, all the crazy changing acronyms for all of the different web app security technologies. And then also, again, the sort of the not sexy stuff. It's going back and making sure that we are still getting better at that stuff that is sitting around, that's been there for a while, whether that is being more proactive about the security of unstructured data. I think that stuff tends to stay around longer than it needs to. And so, getting better governance around that, whether it's looking at our specific internal applications and trying to keep an eye on, how could someone illegitimately use this to potentially, get information out of it. We've got a lot of sensitive information from our customers, and making sure that we're good stewards of that is a really high priority for us. So I think those are a few things on both ends. Plus we've got similar challenges to other folks, making sure that we can manage the solutions that we already have effectively with the team that we have, making sure the solutions we already have are still effective. Do we need to replace something? Do we need to look at a different vendor? Do we need to, add something else in addition to it? We made the switch a couple of years ago to a next gen endpoint protection, but there's lots of other solutions that are more traditional that we have in place as well that we could look at potentially moving to something quote next gen.
Alex, what's been an effective method and process to measure security in your organization? Because when I think of vulnerability management, attack simulation, third-party risk management, they're all various measurements, but what actually works to measure what's effective and what's not in your environment?
So I think it boils down to risk, right? And I think people still have a hard time talking about risk when it comes to security. A lot of times people say risk and they really mean vulnerability. They might say risk and they mean threat. They might mean lots of things when they say risk. But really looking at that risk from a business standpoint, right? It is some negative event that could happen to your organization, and then how likely and how big that risk is. So no matter what the solution is, it's got to either contain or drive down that risk somehow. So I think that's the biggest thing, is tying everything back to that risk. That I don't think anybody does risk management very well. I'll often talk to people, and it's I'll ask, hey, what's your biggest risk? And somebody will say something, oh, my biggest risk is the cloud. Well, that's not a risk. That's a technology. That's not even a threat or a vulnerability. You really have to understand what the risks are to your organization. And I think people don't really take enough time to figure that out. So it doesn't matter how much technology you have, what the solutions are. If you're not tying it back to the risks that actually affect your organization, then you're not going to be able to measure it very well.
Yeah, and I think that the likelihood of an event unfolding in a specific way is so hard to measure. And I'm sure, like at Equifax, for example, like what's the likelihood that someone would find this internal application and they would be but that stuff is so hard to measure. How do you, in your organization, Alex, measure like the likelihood that an event would occur and impact some business function, for example?
Yeah, I think it's not easy, right? And I think that's why a lot of people shy away from figuring out what their risks actually are. Is it's not trivial to figure out that stuff. But one of the other things is I don't think you have to always be as precise as people think you do. You look at some of the risk assessment frameworks, risk management frameworks that are out there, things like FAIR, and their guidance is, looking at the likelihood. All right, well, let's figure out a range. What's the range of likelihood? No one's ever going to be able to say this is, 11.73% likely that it's going to happen. But based on, historical data, based on, the threats that are out there and changes we're seeing in the threat environment, the amount of vulnerabilities that you have and the types of vulnerabilities that you have, I think that you can come up with a pretty decent range of how likely you think something might be. Obviously, the more data that you can get, the smaller that you can make that range, and the more precise your measurements end up coming out. But I think it's a bit of an excuse also that people, they just don't want to put the time in to figure that out. They'd much rather just sort of pull something out of the air and say, well, it's probably 50% likely. Sure, 50%. Let's go with that. And then you end up with bad measurements, and it's really not helping you that much.
Yeah, and I agree. And I also think that there's a certain level of communication on when you do have that data that needs to come together. And I'm kind of thinking of a parallel to like the likelihood of a terrorist attack, right? And I think the worst possible scenario is when people have pockets of information, as has happened in the past in the U.S., and aren't sharing that information to really come up with what's the risk and the likelihood. So what ways are you communicating that when you collect that data?
Yeah, so we're a member of FS-ISAC, for example. So I think ISACs are a great vehicle, not only to get that information, into your organization, but also, there's sharing methods through FS-ISAC. I'm also an InfraGard member here in Denver. That's a great way to get and share some of that information. Of course, there's also, pay services that you can work with for threat intelligence to figure out what exactly is going on out there. But I think that the ISACs are underutilized, even though that they're pretty prevalent these days. There's an ISAC for just about every sort of sector that's out there. I definitely think it's worth getting involved with those, sharing information, getting information. Really great way to do that.
I agree. The ISACs are definitely the most relevant information to your business, whereas the other feeds, there's either a ton of overlap or zero overlap, and who knows if you have that in your environment or not. But an industry-specific one, what people tell me is that that's very a lot more useful to the organization.
But I mean, that takes work too, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just become a member and then have everything solved for you. You have to contribute too, and even on the local level, just being part of your security community, getting out to events, talking to people, getting a network, of folks that that you can talk to and get information from, I think is really important. And that's, one of the things that we've tried to build here in Colorado is a great security community that can help each other and share information and share ideas.
Yeah, I think it's important as you threat model, right, your organization to have those insights into what's happening specifically in your industry is a crucial piece of information. But like you said, it's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Exactly.
Matt, sorry, I interjected there.
No, you're fine. Alex, any advice for aspiring CISOs that you can provide?
So I think that the biggest thing is understand how your business works, and be purposeful about figuring that out. I think a lot of times people take for granted what it is that they do, and how that their business makes money. Because really, at the end of the day, again, tying it back to risk, we want to figure out what the risks are and try and reduce those to an acceptable level. But risk is not a bad thing. You want to, without having some sort of risk, then you're not going to be able to capitalize and make money, right? So you're taking some risk running your organization. So figure out those processes that you have that actually make you money, and figure out where in those there could be some risk, and if there are some that are true risks to those functions happening, that's where you want to start focusing your controls and your efforts to try and lower that risk. I think also, just in general, getting out and talking to people. Again, IT folks, we like to sit behind a keyboard and just do whatever it is that we have to do. Get out, talk to people, make relationships, figure out what's going on in your community, in your organization. That's how you're going to get not only a lot of good information, but that's how you're probably going to get your next job too, is just knowing people. I think it's super important.
Yeah, the network is powerful. Also, just quickly, do a quick plug for Colorado Equals Security, so anybody in Colorado listening can know where to get some more local security news.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. So, Rob Reck, who is the CISO for Ping Identity, and I started Colorado Equals Security a little over a year and a half ago. We had both been involved with ISSA here locally in Denver, and we realized that there were all these great communities of security in Colorado, and we wanted to try and tie all of that together. So really, we started Colorado Equals Security just to talk about how great everything around the security community is here in Colorado, whether that's startups, whether that's organizations, whether that's the people itself. And so, we did a couple things. We started a website to sort of do a consolidated event calendar and some other things. That's at colorado-security.com. And we also started a podcast. So every week we have a podcast with sort of two segments. One is a news segment, and then we interview somebody. So, we talk about the local Colorado security news, jobs, events that are coming up. And then we interview, it might be a founder of a startup. It might be someone here locally in the community, or it might be another security leader here in Colorado. And it's been going great. We also have I think probably the most unexpected and best thing is we started a community Slack channel. And really the only requirement is, you're in Colorado and you're interested in information security. And, we've built that up to nearly 700 people just hanging out, talking on Slack about security and what's been going on in Colorado. So that's been really fun. So I'd encourage everyone, if you have more information or want more information, to check out colorado-security.com.
Yeah, it's you interviewed me, like I said, I think last year, and I think it's great for the local community. Colorado's got a pretty vibrant security scene, lots of startups in the area. I have a number of advisory clients here that still locally that it's always good to stay connected into the community. Alex, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back on Business Security Weekly after a break.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.